1,000 songs. And it goes right in my pocket.
Failure of the future has to be a nation that is agile, that is innovative, that is creative.
Welcome to Future², the podcast all about innovation in the enterprise, brought to you and run by Collective Campus, an innovation hub based in Australia that works with companies to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies and tools to successfully explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. For more information, go to www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast.
Welcome back to Future², everyone. Today I'll be speaking with David Allen. David is widely recognized as the world's leading expert on personal and organizational productivity. His 30-year pioneering research and coaching to corporate managers and CEOs of some of America's most prestigious corporations and institutions has earned him Forbes' recognition as one of the top 5 executive coaches in the United States. Time magazine called his flagship book, Getting Things Done, the definitive business self-help book of the decade. Fast Company magazine called David one of the world's most influential thinkers in the arena of personal productivity for his outstanding programs and writing on time and stress management, the power of aligned focus and vision, and his groundbreaking methodologies in management and executive peak performance. David is the international best-selling author of Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity, Ready for Anything, 52 Productivity Principles for Work and Life, and Making It All Work, Winning at the Game of Work and the Business of Life. With a Twitter following boasting over 1.2 million people, David Allen is one of the most foremost names in life coaching, motivation, and personal productivity there is on the planet. So with that, it gives me much pleasure to introduce to you the one, the only, David Allen. Welcome to the show, David.
Delighted to be here, Steve. Thanks.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So you were born and grew up in Louisiana and spent most of your life in California. But today you actually spend your time with your wife down in Amsterdam. Why the move to the other side of the world?
Oh, I don't know. Perfect storm of a lot of different reasons. We'd fallen in love with the city. We wanted a lifestyle change. Could have been anywhere as long as it's near an airport, given the work that I do. And we love it. We love the Dutch. We love the dramatic weather.
Yeah,
it's it's lovely, and it's an eye candy city. It's also much more the center of the world than Santa Barbara was in terms of my work. And we're spreading our training program around the world now. So Amsterdam is close to almost anywhere.
Yeah,
relative to that anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. And all of my trips to Northern Europe. Ultimately, what I can say about the weather is warm days, but very wet mornings. Seems to be the case.
Yeah, we like it.
Yeah, fantastic. I know you've been educating yourself on Dutch art and history, but what I really want to know, David, is whether or not you've adopted the red and white of the Ajax Amsterdam Football Club.
No. I love to see how frantic the Dutch get.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Yeah,
but it's a great game.
Yeah, definitely, and they are quite fanatical supporters. So, look, let's get down to it. You're now 70, David, but your career has spanned a path that has included jobs as, well, let me get this list: magician, waiter, karate teacher, landscaper, vitamin distributor, glass-blowing lathe operator, travel agent, gas station manager, U-Haul dealer, moped salesman, restaurant cook, personal growth trainer, manager of a lawn service company, and manager of a travel agency. You've had 35 professions before you were just 35, and this was at a time before it was the norm to spend your whole life at one company. Do you want to tell me a bit about how that all came about? Is this a testament to the character of David Allen, that you tried so many things before you were just 35?
Yeah, part of it, and part of it was I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, so I had to basically had to make my way and make a living, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and that's a little bit of an exaggeration. There weren't really 35 careers or professions. I sat down and listed how many things I'd actually done for money, and some of those were one night stands. So
yeah,
a little bit of an exaggeration.
Fair enough.
Frankly, I was just I was usually more interested in sort of exploration and just curiosity about life, essentially, and not particularly aspirational or entrepreneurial about any one particular job or profession, but had to make a living. So I bounced around from that. And I actually became a pretty good number two guy, and I had friends. As I got older, I had friends who were starting their own businesses and running their own stuff, and I said, well, let me go at least help them out. And so I was, I would just show up and look around to see what they were doing and see, how much easier I could try to make it, because I'm kind of basically a lazy kind of guy. You could call it efficient if you want, but I just look around and say, hey, you could do that a little bit easier, and here's a better way to do that. Now they call that process improvement, kind of a cool. But back then, I just looked around and helped them fix stuff, and then it got onto cruise control, got onto autopilot, and then I get bored, and then I went and did something else. Then I discovered one day they actually call people something that do that, and they pay the money. It's called a consultant. So 1981, I hung out my shingle and became one. Now Allen Associates. Wow. Yeah. So that's really where a lot of that came from, and ultimately a career that it's always different, always something new. And, I learned how to basically put together stuff that no matter who I worked with improved, how they experienced life and their work, et cetera. And so, it's a good career and profession. So haven't looked back since. So
no, that's fantastic. And I mean, a lot of what we teach people about within our consultancy is that, in order to support innovation and entrepreneurship, broad experiences count for a lot. And would you say that, having had such broad experiences that, they've served you in ways that perhaps someone who's stuck to the tried and true path of one job for their whole career, perhaps wouldn't have had the same benefit?
I think so. In retrospect, certainly I could look at it and say, well, what I started to notice was what was common to all of them in terms of how people behaved and what could work for all of them. And, I got, just in terms of my own career in that regard, I was very hungry to find what are some models, some things to do, some thought processes or some procedures or processes that no matter who I worked with, in case it wasn't evident and obvious when I showed up, how I could add value to what they were doing, I could apply the model and it would add value. And so that's why I got hungry to sort of find out those things for myself first. And so uncovering the methodology that I wound up, becoming the Getting Things Done, or the GTD methodology, was really in the process of working with a lot of people in a lot of situations and finding something that was truly created that sense of greater control and greater focus, which are the two sort of key elements of the benefit of this methodology. But it worked for anybody and for everybody. So it was, it was delightful to then just have a profession where I could, no matter who I worked with, no matter how old they were or what industry they were in or what level of profession that they were at, that I had, found some methods and some processes and a model that actually worked for everybody. So that was, so I guess that all that background sort of helped me discover what that was.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I guess on that model, the GTD model or the Get Things Done model, it's considered, arguably one of the world's most popular productivity systems, even though I know you're reluctant to call it that. But for the benefit of our listeners who may be unfamiliar with the framework, David, can you provide a high-level overview of what the Get Things Done methodology is, and perhaps walk us through the 5 basic steps?
Sure. Well, basically it's about how do I create, more space. You don't need more time, you just need more room. And it doesn't take any time to have a good idea or to be loving or to be present or to be, highly focused, but they do require room. In other words, you need room inside your head. You need psychic space, if you will. So it's a way to be able to then, how do I get stuff off my mind? Things are usually, when things are on your mind, they're not happening. On your mind is usually in an inverse relationship to how much things are getting done. Because things are usually on your mind because there are decisions about it you haven't made, or you haven't parked the results into a trusted system. So the methodology is really about how do I externalize all of those levels of different commitments that I have, all the would, could, shoulds, need tos, ought tos, whatever. And most people have a whole lot more of those than they realize. And you pay a price if you don't manage those things appropriately, if you don't create appropriate engagement with it. So it's really a set of practices or a set of behaviors that produce appropriate engagement with your commitments. So that first of all, you have to recognize what those commitments are. That's the capture step one. So write stuff down. What's on your mind? Oh, I need dog food, or I need a life, or I need to fix my printer, or I need to research a new marketing campaign, or whatever those things are. You need to identify those, get them out of your head, and then sooner than later, you need to clarify. Step two, you need to decide, well, what specifically are you going to do about that? What's the outcome? What's the action step that needs to be taken to move something forward? And then once you make those decisions, step three is then to organize the results of that. If you can't finish them the moment you think of it, you better, park it somewhere. That's the organization step, where you put it on a list, or you put it in a folder, you put it somewhere where those things live. And then step four is you step back and then take a look at all the different things that you need to do, the reflect and review process. Then, what are the 8 phone calls you need to make? What are the 53 projects that you're invested in completing? What is all that stuff? And that's the review step. And then step 5 is basically, how do you engage? Where do you put your attention, your focus, or your activity based upon all of that stuff? So it's nothing. It's not a foreign. This is not like some new technology or foreign language. Those are simple behaviors, but you're not born doing them, and you actually have to put some cognitive horsepower, and apply your thinking process in a very specific way in order to make those decisions about emails that show up, about the ideas you wake up with in the morning, and the notes you're taking in the meeting, and so forth. And so dealing with all of that, most people just sort of spread all that stuff around. And it creates this sort of residue in their, in this static in their brain, as opposed to keeping it nice and clear. So it's a fairly simple set of behaviors, but again, most people don't do it very, very consistently or completely. And it's game changing when you do.
Yeah, and oftentimes the best solutions are the most simple ones, but people just don't do them for whatever reason. And I guess I often find myself getting into flow when I'm away from my desk, going for a long walk, down at the gym, all sorts of things. Basically, when my mind is at peace. And what I tend to do is I take out my phone if I come up with an idea, which I usually do when I'm in this relaxed state, and I take out an app, say like Asana, and I'll put in the task, and I guess that would be the capture or the recognize stage. So as long as I've captured that somewhere, I find that my mind is at ease. Whereas if I have to remember something, and let's face it, how many things can you possibly remember, it becomes a bit more of a burden on the mind. Do you have any tools that help you support the GTD framework, Alan, that you use, particularly online or apps?
Well, the most common one is called pen and paper. Because you can't beat it. No Wi-Fi required, no batteries required. But that's for the capture step. The capture step is different than the organize step. However, I need to write down an idea or a thought or something that I might find meaningful, that I might need to decide about or do something about, and then later on I need to then decide or do something about it. But the capture step itself, there's nothing beats low tech. So I carry a little notepad with me, in my wallet. I've got pads, on my desk, and I have a physical in tray where I throw all those notes. Once I decide what I need to do about it, if I, like a call I need to make, or a website I need to surf, or something I need to, a document I need to draft, or whatever, then I will then make a note about that in my system, my organization system. My organization system is digital. I use Lotus Notes. We use that in our company, so I have an overlay of that. But basically, it's just a list manager, and so I'll park that in there. So that's basically a pretty simple system.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I guess it ultimately helps us, quiet what you've referred to as the monkey mind. Oftentimes, we've got deadlines to meet, laundry to pick up, bills to pay, marketing campaigns to run, analytics to run, dinners to organize, et cetera, and just being able to capture all these different tasks and priorities somewhere central helps quiet that monkey mind.
Sure, absolutely. When and again, it sounds pretty simple, but it's not just that you're capturing them. You also need to make sure that you've decided what's the very next action step you need to take about any of those things. And you also need to step back and reflect and review of these things. A lot of people, become just compulsive list makers. They just make lists all over the place, but they don't look at them and they don't engage with them appropriately. So there really is a set of practices or behaviors that really is a holistic approach to being appropriately engaged with all those commitments.
Yeah. And if I'm, say, working for a startup or even a large enterprise and I've got, say, 10 to 20 things on my to-do list every day, but how do you have any methodologies in terms of prioritizing what gets done first? For example, obviously the reflect stage may help in prioritizing that, but there's only so many hours in a day, so it can be difficult for people, I think, to prioritize where are they going to get the most value up front. If I've got 20 things, obviously there's going to be maybe one or two things where I'm going to get the most value. If we look at things like the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, what advice do you have for our listeners when it comes to prioritizing the tasks?
Yeah, well, it's not quite as simple as ABC, 1, 2, 3, high, medium, low priorities.
Sure.
I mean, if you need dog food, you need dog food. Now, dog food is probably not, the most strategic thing in your life, but your dog may think it is. And your relationship with your dog might make it, has an importance to you. So all those things that if you're, to your point, it's like, yes, there's always something where you'd say, okay, if I finish this, that's going to produce more value than something else. I have a pretty simple formula called what most has my attention. What's the thing that if I handle it will take off the most pressure off my head? Because I love having nothing on my mind. So what's most on my mind? So oftentimes it's a good thing to think about that. But again, if you only have 10 minutes before a meeting, the only thing you can do is something you could do in 10 minutes. And, your most, quote, strategic thing might require an hour of uninterrupted time. So understood that, given all the options in terms of how many things you could do and given the context you're in, and that context is how much time do you have, how much energy you have, and where are you, what tools do you have at hand. Then given that, if you have choices still, then sure, then you need to ask yourself which one of those calls, if I complete that call right now, would give me the highest payoff. And that what would give you the highest payoff could mean a lot of things. It could be, God, this thing is just so old, I'll just feel really good if I finally get this off my list. Even though it may not be that strategic, it's just bothering you that it keeps hanging around. Sometimes the most strategic thing to do is to take a day and do all the secondary things you've been avoiding because there were so many other things you need to get done. Sometimes you need to spend the day and go to the hardware store and get the 3 things that you need to fix the light and the lamp on your porch. That kind of stuff. Sometimes those have the highest payoff. And then again, you can also go back to the different horizons that people have commitments.
Yes.
I've identified 6 horizons. What thing, which email, if you answered it, was going to most fulfill your life purpose. Now that's, even if you knew your life purpose, that may not help a whole lot make those kind of mundane tactical decisions. So there are other levels. What's the vision of your purpose being fulfilled? What are the goals that you need to accomplish or things you need to, to handle in terms of objectives that would move you toward the vision that you've got in your head? And then what are the things you need to maintain so that you've got a healthy and balanced enterprise to get you there? And what are all the projects you need to finish about all that? And what are all the action steps you need to take about any of the above? So those 6 different horizons, the more conscious you are about what the inventory of content is on those different levels, then the more you can start to trust your intuition about which one of those activities is going to give you the highest payoff.
Yeah, and you've beautifully articulated that using the analogy of altitude. And for example, the lower the altitude, the more you're focusing on what's immediate, what are those next actions that I need to perform. But the higher the altitude, the more it's about your life's purpose and your mission. And is it right to assume that the higher the level of altitude, the less frequently you'll review how you're tracking?
Yeah, well, generally speaking, if you clarify where you want to be 5 years from now, you probably don't need to rethink that every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe every month or every quarter or whatever. And you, of course, need to recalibrate it whenever you get better data and you mature. Your thinking is going to mature about your long-term goals as well. So it's not a bad idea to have a consistent level of conversation about all of these. Again, it goes back to, what do you need to do to get your long-term vision off your mind? I need to clarify. I need to sit down with my life partner, and we need to discuss it in terms of what's coming up and choices we might need to make. So, any and all of those, to be sure, the higher the altitude, usually the less frequently you probably need to rethink it or recalibrate it. But sometimes you got to rethink it quite often. You just need to rethink it as often as you need to get it off your mind. See, if I'm playing with my dog and I want to think about my strategic plan, I need to have already thought about it. So, you need to appropriately engage, essentially. It's back to appropriate engagement. Are you appropriately engaged with your longer-term pictures or goals? See, I don't necessarily say that everybody should set goals. I think you should set goals if setting goals is necessary for you to get something off your mind or to appropriately engage with it. If you've got kids you need to send to college and, your finances is something about how you're going to manage that, you're probably going to need to set some sort of target out there in terms of, finances and in terms of, getting the kids in the right places, et cetera. So in order to be able to appropriately engage with your commitment with your kids. So, again, it comes back to, well, what do you need to do to get that off your mind? Yeah. And you just need to start to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and I like that approach because I think people are often guilty of placing what's urgent in front of what's important, to paraphrase Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits. And I guess this forces people, well, it doesn't force them, obviously it's a choice whether or not they want to use the methodology, but using this approach, they actually take the time to step back and say, okay, despite what my urgent tasks are, here's what the bigger mission looks like. Here's my areas of responsibility. Here's my goals, my vision, my purpose.
Sure. Yeah. Again, having those. Again, as I say, what you need to do is just hardwire your intuitive intelligence so that you can then trust your sort of intuitive judgment calls as you're moving through the week. See, we usually don't have time to think. You need to have already thought. Once you throw yourself out there in the world, the fire hose of reality kind of hits you in the face. You need to then make sure that you've sort of wired yourself internally so that you could, make quick judgment calls as you need to, and then regroup. But I think one of the biggest needs most people have is that reflection time. I think most executives that I work with and coach and people I train and teach, the biggest need probably is at least once a week, what I've identified as the weekly review, and that's at least once a week, you need to take 1 to 2 hours and step back and, as I say, manage the forest instead of just hug the trees. And you need to, climb up in the fire tower and look around, at all of your stuff. That's, there's a walk around the rose garden, stare at your navel, figure out your life purpose. There's nothing wrong with that too. But most people are missing a more operational kind of review. In other words, step back and take a look at the 40 or 50 or 60 projects that you have and say, what's the status of all those things? And, it's kind of that level of step back, but not too far from your, work and your life. And then see how are all those aspects going? Because a lot of people have the big picture stuff, or they have a lot of little detail stuff. But somehow everybody seems to be lacking in between.
No, that makes sense. And with that, I tend to do what is a daily review where I review what happened during the day, what I did well, what I could have done better. And then I guess that's just part of an ongoing sort of self-improvement thing. But the weekly review, I guess, is some of those bigger tasks, like you said. What projects are you currently working on? How are they progressing? Are they on track? I think you perfectly articulated that as in the sweet spot between those day-to-day tasks and that big life mission.
Most people, I think the list most people are lacking is a list of all of their projects. And I have, as you may know, I have a very broad definition of a project, of anything that one action won't finish that you're committed to complete. So get tires on your car, handle the next holiday with your family, launch the ad campaign, hire the assistant, research a new cell phone provider, all of those kinds of things like that. And most people have between 30 and 100 of those, the typical inventory, if you take all the personal ones as well as as professional. But, get your watch fixed, just ask yourself, where you live, does everything work? Oh, no, well, my printer is broken, or I need to fix a window, pane, or all those kind of things. Believe it or not, those are the kind of things that actually start to drain your energy simply because they keep yelling at you or whispering to you or whatever. And if you don't sort of manage them appropriately, that doesn't mean you have to go complete all of them, but you do need to take a look at what they are and make sure that you're appropriately engaged with that. And as I say, you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you know what you're not doing.
Yeah.
And most people don't have a clue about all the stuff they're not doing. They know it. It's subliminally, and that's what's wakes them up at 3 o'clock in the morning, or tends to make them tired when they walk into those environments.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I guess I wanted to touch on, you've been quoted as saying the people who are most attracted to GTD are the ones who need it the least. And I guess to that end, have you noticed a difference in the way that, say, entrepreneurs approach productivity or managing their personal time compared to, say, employees of a large company?
No, not anymore. Everybody seems to be somewhat in the same boat.
Yep.
And even if you're working in a large company, you're still kind of on your own. And these days, most organizations don't have the resources to be hand-holding. They need to assume that people are self-starting. They need to assume that people are running their own show and managing their own show. And it's somewhat different if you have an entrepreneur that wears all those different hats and has to shift roles that rapidly. But I find that pretty universal out there, no matter who I'm dealing with and no matter what kind of organization that they're in.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a pretty big improvement opportunity in terms of just managing all these aspects of it.
Yeah, and have you noticed situations where employees say they have, with all intents and purposes, they want to implement the GTD framework, they want to optimize their time and manage their time accordingly and effectively, but they work, say, for a big bureaucratic organization, maybe a large management consultancy, where perhaps they aren't really the kings of their time, and they spend 12 to 14 hours at work. They have this pressure to be seen to be at the office working and staying back and all that sort of stuff. How does one tackle that and still implement parts of the GTD framework?
Well, the GTD framework is for anybody, anytime. Anybody that's got a busy life that needs to keep track of a lot of stuff they can't finish the moment they think of it, can then use this methodology. And in a way, the more out of control your environment is, the more you better be in control of your own. Yeah. So that you know what's yours and what's theirs. So, what you don't want to do is is catch the virus of your environment if your environment is out of control. So, handling your own 10 acres, as we say, is going to be important for anybody, no matter what your circumstances are. And, entrepreneurs are as much at effect of their own creativity as somebody who works for a big organization. So, everybody essentially, is at effect of their world if you let it get to you. Yeah. And so, being able to step back and be much more objective about, the world that you're in. That's why, again, feeling more in control and more appropriately focused and getting more room inside your head is going to make it a lot easier to navigate all of that.
Yeah, exactly right. And our podcast is all about innovation and entrepreneurship predominantly, David. So in innovation, in entrepreneurship, moving quickly is absolutely critical. The faster you move, the faster you learn, and the faster you can find product market fit. So would you say that by using GTD, by clearing the mind, by focusing, we're going to essentially be able to focus and learn better and therefore help us on that entrepreneurial journey?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you need to engage. I learned in the martial arts. If you're sparring with somebody, you don't ever stand still. Because it takes too much energy to essentially create momentum to begin with. Even if you're going 180 degrees the wrong direction, at least if you're moving, it actually takes less energy to switch gears and to go another direction. So staying engaged is really critical. And oftentimes the way you need to appropriately engage with a lot of your stuff is deciding what's the next action on it so that you know what engagement looks like. And then you're able to take advantage of it. In other words, somebody walks into your office, you need to have kept track of every single thing you might need to talk to that person about or ask that person about, in case you see them. So having a list, an agenda list, means you're going to make things move a lot faster, a lot cleaner, a lot slicker. And so the whole idea of building a good, systematic approach to how you keep track of all the stuff that you've committed to do certainly allows you to navigate in a much more streamlined way. Back to your point that you need to be highly flexible. You need to be open. You need to, make sure that you're not over and underreacting to things. That's why I use the image from martial arts of mind like water, because that allows you to then be open to whatever the new situation possibilities are, as opposed to preconceived notions about it.
Yeah, and that ultimately helps us get the most out of every situation. For example, you used the case there of someone walking into your office, and it could just be that, you can apply the same analogy to meetings. People have a lot of meetings, but what often happens is people spend an hour or two in these meetings and ultimately don't get the most out of it. Subsequent meeting needs to be called because there is a lack of action items addressing the initial reason for that meeting being called, and people just aren't prepared and they don't know what needs to be discussed, and what should really be a 20-minute conversation ends up being dragged out into multiple meetings and taking weeks and weeks to get resolved. So clearly having some sort of a system in place will help to optimize not just meetings, but all those day-to-day interactions with different people, whether it's in your work life, whether it's in your personal life, and so on.
Sure. Well, I call it the fundamental thought process. The fundamental thought process about productivity or anything really is outcome and action. What are we trying to accomplish, and how do we allocate or reallocate resources to make it happen? So to your point about meetings, how many meetings start without people going, well, what exactly would we like to have true by what time? If that's not clear, then, why even be at the meeting?
Exactly.
You don't even know how to frame the conversation unless the outcome has been determined. And how many people have conversations that they don't end with, what did we just decide, and what's the next step? Is that yours or mine?
Yeah.
So we've seen whole cultures changes with those two questions becoming part of the lexicon. Wait a minute. What are we trying to accomplish with this project? What are we trying to accomplish with this meeting? What are we trying to accomplish with this form we're designing? And by the way, what's the next step, and who's got it? So that becomes as simple as that sounds. Those are those questions are quite lacking in many environments and in many circumstances. For sure.
Sounds very simple, but I definitely agree it's something that's not done anywhere nearly enough. Something as simple as saying, hey, what's the objective of this meeting or this project? Who's going to do what by when? When are we going to reconvene and make sure that it's on track, monitor those outcomes, etc.? It just doesn't happen anywhere nearly as it should. So some criticisms of GTD, David, are that it's been focused on planning and reducing everything to context and next action. And I guess some people may find it tedious and impractical. How do you respond to these criticisms?
I don't.
Fair enough.
Hey, anybody keeps a calendar, they're already doing that.
Yeah.
They're already keeping something out of their head, and they've got a context called, hey, in space and time, where do I need to be at what time? Right. So they're already doing that. If you keep a little sticky note or post-it on your refrigerator for the food you need next time you go to the store, that's what you're already creating a list by context.
Yeah.
Hey, at store, these are three things that move forward there in that context.
Yeah.
So that's why I say I don't really respond to that, because everybody's already doing it. The criticism, why would you criticize that? That's just the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. So I guess if you could give our audience just one tip, David, on something that would begin to radically improve their productivity and their lives today, what would that one tip be?
Your head's for having ideas, but not for holding them.
Ah, very good. I like that. Fantastic. Okay, we're down to what I like to call the fun end of the equation tonight, David, or this morning in your time. Basically, I ask all of my guests 2 hypotheticals and 1 on lifestyle design. So question number 1, and given that you are somebody who's had a lot of careers, a lot of one-day jobs, casual gigs, etc., I'm not sure how you respond to this, but I ask everyone, if you could work for any company at any stage of their company life cycle, who would it be and why?
If I could work for any company at any part of their life cycle, probably I would. What would I work for? That's a good question. Because I actually work for within a lot of different companies, all the time. So I'm always in there. And I guess I would just do what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. And look,
I don't know that I would change it. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because ultimately I wanted to be able to do something that was that universal.
Yeah, where you can make a real impact and change lives, I guess. Fantastic. Question number 2 is, if you could ask anybody a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
I would probably ask. I would probably ask Benjamin Franklin what he was most proud of in his life.
Wow. Yeah, because he obviously influenced quite a bit of American history and the democratic sort of society that it is today.
And he was quite a rogue too. He's kind of a hero of mine.
Fantastic. And the final question, David, I always ask people how they stay on top of their game. And I know that you went through some turbulent times in your life, particularly in the early 70s, when you discovered heroin, left your marriage, abandoned your academic training, and eventually found yourself on the street. But despite being mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, at the bottom, you bounced out of this to eventually become one of the most prominent life coaches and speakers on the planet. What did it take to pull you out of that hole? Obviously, it was a long time ago now, almost half a century, but just really curious to hear that story.
Really, the decision that the world was not out to get me, and that it was much bigger than me, and so I decided to cooperate with it as opposed to rail against it.
Makes sense. And I guess to that effect, these days, do you have any rituals or routines other than implementing the GTD framework that help you stay on top of your game every day?
Well, first thing I do is I drink a glass of lemon water to help cleanse my system.
Yep.
I have a great cup of French press coffee, and and I read the front page of the paper. So those kind of tease me up and gets me ready for my day. Otherwise, it's just spontaneity and do what I feel like doing.
Excellent. Very healthy. And also a big fan of lemon water myself. So gettingthingsdone.com, people can head there to find out a little bit more about you and your work. Is there anywhere else they should head to?
No, that's where you can find all the stuff. And of course, the new edition of Getting Things Done should be out there where any place that sells books. So
fantastic.
Take a look.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, David. We'll be posting that in the show notes. Any last words of wisdom for our audience?
No, just other than, hey, relax, have fun. It's a big world out there.
It is. Thank you so much. Cheers, David.
Thanks, Steve. Take care.
Well, that's it for our chat with David Allen. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you did, I would really love it if you spent just a second to like, subscribe, and share us on either iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you'd like to subscribe to our mailing list, you can do so at Future².xyz. And finally, something I'm really excited about, the team here at Collective Campus have just published an online course for innovation managers and entrepreneurs at large companies. To check it out, head to innovationmanagerscourse.com. We're currently running early bird specials for you lovely podcast listeners where you can access all of the course material. That's all 12 weeks of material for less than $500. So that's innovationmanagerscourse.com. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out on Twitter at Steve Glaveski or send me an email at steve@collectivecamp.us. Until next time, Future² out.